Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 13 of Excel TV here on a Tuesday night. First up, let's say hello to everybody. Oz, how you doing?
I am hot. I'm hot in the bulled owl here. It's like 92 degrees in Chicago, but I'm also hot because Excel TV is live again on Lucky 13 with our favorite Canadian Ken Puls here. Welcome.
Thank you. And you're probably thinking to yourself, did he just say boiled owl? Yes. he said hotter than boiled owl. Jordan, what's up?
What's up? Just having fun here in sunny and humid Dayton, Ohio. Having a great time and getting ready for another great episode of Excel TV. Let's do it.
I never know what I'm going to get with you, Jordan. Sometimes you're the 1%er with your tie, and other times you're like you're 99. You're full on 99%, man.
Right. Well, I like to switch it up.
Just keep us guessing. You're a hipster sometimes. And we have a special guest today, Ken Puls. Would you mind saying hello?
Hey everyone, I'm sitting out here in sunny out in Nanaimo, British Columbia as well. I'm really happy to be here for lucky number 13. This is great.
So, I like the way you served that up. I didn't consider that. Hello everybody. I'm Rick Grantham. Tonight's beverage of choice is Bud Light, which means Bud Light Lime. This is not my fault. This means there was likely a female at the house at some point who left errant beer in the fridge, so don't hold me responsible for this. And just to show you that it's really bad, by the time we hit the news section, we'll be on another one. so that's tough. This is Rick Grantham of rickgrantham.com, also of ExcelTVShow.com. We have a special person to talk to tonight who hasn't been here before, and that's our good friend Carl Pepperseed. Will you take it away, Carl?
Yes, Rick, thank you. I just want to have a little announcement here. Let me put my name up here. We need prayers and positive thoughts sent out to Mr. Andy McAdoo, who last week he took 5 years of credit card statements, travel history, and phone records and merged them all in a spreadsheet. He then used Excel's advanced filter, pivot tables, and was able to compile evidence that his wife was having an affair on him. But it didn't stop. Mr. McAdoo then used the frequency array function and created a histogram. He used Power View to generate an animated scatter plot of the whole 5-year period. And still, a normal man would stop and confront his wife, but no. He did successfully predict the time and location of the next rendezvous with Miss McAdoo and her lover, because the man was feeling invincible, and he set up a stakeout in a field outside the hotel. But unfortunately, he hid behind a fire ant nest. So please send your prayers to Mr. McAdoo, who's in intensive care, and he will recover after being stung by all those fire ants. He's got anaphylactic shock in his feet, his legs, forehead, and hands. He's got loose teeth and a black eye from when it fell on his night vision goggles. You'd think the man would at least map the neighborhood fire ant mounds in Power View if he knew what to do. But send your prayers. Thank you.
Loose Tooth McAdoo. You heard it here. Loose Tooth McAdoo from Carl Pepperseed. Carl, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So that's what's happening around the world in Excel this week. But also,
McAdoo.
Carl, you got it. So Jordan, would you mind kicking us off with the tip of the week, or the challenge of the week?
I will take it away. Now, that McAdoo, or I should say that Pepperseed, he looked awfully like someone I know. I can't put my finger on it.
Maybe Bill Jelen. Bill Jelen, maybe.
Probably Bill Jelen. I think.
I got it with the mustache thing, or I could see it.
Yeah, definitely. When you add the mustache, I really just see Mr. Excel.
It had a Dan Aykroyd feel to it, definitely.
Okay, so we're going to jump to this week's challenge, and this week's challenge was a blast from the past, from those good old days. So let me throw up that screen share to throw up that PowerPoint. Stop saying throw up on there. Kind of sounds weird. Let's Let's show it right now. Okay, so last week I said that there was an Easter egg in Excel and one of the versions of Excel, and for those who remember this Easter egg, it created a flight simulator, and you could fly around, and then you could go see the credits. So I asked you, what version of Excel? And you responded, Excel 97. And if you did respond that, you were correct. And there we have Clippy, who is our good old friend from Excel 97, one of the great characters Microsoft created to make our lives easier. So who was this week's winner? Well, this week's winner was Jim Birch. Congratulations, Jim. You win a Modelock entry for free. Good job. And Clippy thanks you. What's that, Clippy? I think he thinks that you're writing a resume and wants to know if you need help. All right, so we're going to talk about next week's challenge. As of Excel 2013, what is the longest formula function? I can guarantee you I've never used this function. Now, some people have, and maybe if you are a person who likes long functions, you know which one it is, but I had to look this one up. So that is what we're looking for. Now remember, if you know the answer to this week's challenge, you can tweet us at ExcelTV, you can go on our Facebook, or you can send us an email, challenge@exceltvshow.com. Or you can also send a letter to our good friend Carl Pepperseed, and he will recite the answer as a story. So that is our challenge. Back to you, Rick.
Thank you, Jordan. Yeah, Carl Pepperseed given the answer every week. That'd be epic. Can't wait for that. And actually, I think I know who Carl Pepperseed is. Whenever I saw Clippy there, I think that might be Clippy. So our special guest this week, straight out of Canada, Mr. Ken Puls of ExcelGuru.ca. Now, I first became aware of Ken about a year and a half or so ago. Whenever I was stalking him. I was stalking his Twitter page, stalking his Facebook page. He was about to get 100 likes on his Facebook page, and he said, hey, whoever is my 100th like, I'm going to give away a pivot table course to.
So Rick promptly unliked my page so he could be the 100th like again, right?
You damn Skippy. And then I told on myself, because I said, hey, what's stopping me from doing exactly what I'm about to do?
Yeah. So 8 hours he sat there waiting, watching, just making sure he could be the 100th like.
Then finally Ken said, you know, Rick, you weren't number 100, and quite honestly, even if you were number 100, it would have been kind of cheesy because you were stalking me out there in front of everybody. So anyway, so Ken, would you mind saying hello to everybody? Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone. So my name's Ken Puls. I live and work up in Canada in a place called Nanaimo, which is God's country out on Vancouver Island. My day job, I work as the controller and director of IT of a resort. We've got a golf course, a marina, fitness facilities, food and beverage, and property development. And then in evenings, like to say, I put on my superhero cape and go and do Excel work on my evenings, weekends, and vacation days. That's what I go and do. Spend my time is writing website articles and teaching people how to use Excel better. So, fun stuff.
Cool. So, tell us about Excel Guru.
What about it specifically? It all started as a hobby, believe it or not. So, let me see now. Back in must have been around 2000 when I started working at the resort. I was trying to figure out how to get some things done, and I stumbled into to VBA and started to teach myself that, which worked for about a year, and then I ran into some problems where I couldn't figure some things out. But it was okay. I mean, you kept doing things, and everybody in the office thought, hey, you're the guy that knows the most, so they ask you the questions, you think you're pretty good, and then we had an interesting part where our head office came in and decided that we were overstaffed, so they decided they'd cut our staffing down, and we lost a third of our people overnight. And by the way, the deadlines got tighter, and we needed more work and all that kind of jazz. And I figured out that the only way to get through this was going to be learn VBA. So I ended up spending a lot of time in forums, and basically where Excel Guru came from is I started to feel so guilty about all the knowledge that I was stealing out of all these forums taken from people that were giving it to me for free. So I decided that I should really try and give back to the community and sort of reinvest and build a website to show some of my own examples of how it was working and whatever else. So that's where it sort of started, if you will.
So what is the top under 30? I think this is an award you might have won up in Canada. What is this?
No, that was the it was the under 40. I'm not under 30, man. Actually, I'm
Okay.
not under 40 anymore either. Yeah, so there was a top 20 under 40 award that it had existed previously, but it had sort of fallen apart. And I guess last year, a group of local business people here decided they wanted to put it back together. So they got a whole bunch of resumes and sort of profile documents for everybody in the area that wanted to submit for it, and I think I submitted about an inch of paper of the different things that I've done, and plainly it was one by weight. So mine had the biggest stack full of paper, and it ended up paying off. So. But I mean, the stuff they were looking at, I mean, not to cheapen it or anything. I mean, they're looking at influence of what people have done, how they help people in the local community, how they help people in different areas, different things they've done in their business and whatever else. So I like to think that I'm the only person that was on that list that can actually say that they helped somebody who was actually in or helped somebody with their business that was sending things out of our own atmosphere, because I do have an example in the past where NASA actually used some of my code to monitor power levels on the International Space Station. So not many people can make that kind of a claim, which is pretty cool. So.
Wow.
Very cool.
I've also noticed, and I'll let you guys jump in. I also noticed that it's hard for me to go to a training site or look at different bits of training without hearing your voice.
Good. That's excellent.
It's weird. It's like I hear it. It's not really I can't really tell that it's you, and then I look in like the little credits or something like this. Oh, Ken Puls. So what all training are you involved in? What all training do you deliver that people would find out there on the web?
Well, that's funny because not nearly enough. So I've done a curriculum with the Certified General Accountants up here, and that one is sort of through their website. And that one we actually go into a professional studio and shoot in front of cameras. It's got the whole hair, lights, and makeup and everything. And then I've got a company that I've been working with out of Australia called Go Skills, and I built an entire curriculum for them, which is I think we're about 36. 5 to 10 minute videos with those guys that gets consumed, and that one's actually doing really, really well, which is great. And then I've got my own pivot table video on my website. I need to add more stuff there, and I've got a little bit of YouTube stuff, but not too much. But I mean, that's pretty much. Oh, and I guess I sent some stuff to chat. You know what? I've lost count, Rick. I don't know. It seems to be showing up everywhere.
Particularly the O skills stuff. Whenever I saw that, which is pretty slick, and we'll have a link underneath here whenever we show the video. But yeah, it was pretty slick just to hear your voice out there, and I'm like, wow, this guy's everywhere.
Yeah, actually, I enjoy doing that. We end up shooting the stuff here just in front of my computer or whatever else. And I mean, I got a pretty good boom microphone or whatever, but it's fun. I mean, it's neat, and I mean, I enjoy doing it, right? So I like to think that kind of shines through. So
I've got a question. So Kedra Cheney was on a few episodes ago, and we talked about training and what it takes to deliver training. What kind of things go into building a curriculum?
Blood, sweat, and tears. You know what? I mean,
the kind of questions that you might ask, or how do you set yourself up so that you can deliver?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, I approach it in a couple different ways. I mean, it's either feature first, when you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I teach people to use different features in the stuff, or are we trying to build a curriculum that takes you from point A to point B with a specific topic? So if we're going into a course on, I mean, I don't know, let's say pivot tables or whatever, we'd start off and say, okay, well, in order to use pivot tables, we've got to figure out how to teach people how to clean up their data and get into good format first. Let's teach them how to use tables, then we'll build pivot tables. If we're trying to teach them how to give a broad brush thing to say, look, I mean, we're gonna build you into somebody who knows their way around Excel a little bit, and we've got 20 hours to do it, then we're going to sort of take a little bit wider approach and scatter across. Say these are the main features that we really want to focus on. You need to learn some formulas. You need to learn how to clean up your data. You need to learn some pivots. You need to learn how to do your print previews, or how to do your conditional formatting, and different things like that. So different things go into different ones. Personally, for the way I teach, one of the biggest things that I like to have is a good set of examples. I find that people really resonate with that when they can actually look at it and say, geez, I don't want to just learn a technique, although learning techniques is good, but I want to be able to see how to actually put that into practice somewhere and use something that makes sense. So for me, one of the ones I like to do a lot is I'll use the example of like a liquor store, beer or wine or cider, because it's a funny thing about when you go and you teach people, you talk about alcohol and they all sit up and listen. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
As
Okay.
Rick's drinking his beer.
Yeah, my girly beer at that.
Wow.
Cool.
Jordan?
So, I had to develop a curriculum for something that may or may not be happening, but there's always this tension between the stuff I want to put in, and then I show it to the people who are who are producing it, and they go, "Whoa, that's way too much material," and I know it when I do it, and I'm always hoping at the end there's enough time to complete that, but there never is. So I was wondering if there's ever like this tension in you where you feel like, man, I just wish I could cover everything, but I can't. What do you do about that? How do you balance that?
You know what? I've been really lucky with that. I mean, the groups that have approached me have been very much told, or basically come out and said, okay, what is it going to take, and how much time do we need, and build the curriculum out. I mean, one of the curriculums that we built and we've got through. There's 10 courses recorded for the CGA one. There's an awful lot more in the pipeline when you look at it. I mean, I think by the time. I think it was about 40 or 50 1 to 2 hour courses that were sort of built into that to really go into a great big thing. And unfortunately, that hasn't been able to complete at this point in time, but I'm still hopeful it will in the future. The Go Skills one was a very different target. I mean, that one they looked at and they said, you know what, we want to get through all these different pieces, but the focus that we have is you got 5 minutes. And I mean, when I wrote the Ribbon X book with Robert Martin, I mean, he nicknamed me Verbose Man. I go on a lot. So, I mean, for those ones, it is challenging, but I mean, basically what you do is you just try and scope it back to try and get into okay, well, here's the stuff that I know that I can do, here's the stuff I know I absolutely have to do, and then there's definitely stuff that falls on the cutting room floor. And, I'm lucky that with most of my clients that I've been able to come back and say, you know what, this thing is really important. I'm not so worried about this, but this is really important, or this is really cool. We need to have these components in there, and they've been good. They've listened on those, so it's good.
Well, one thing I've noticed, it's been disappointing for me and the students when I've packed so much in and there's very little room for questions. It almost seems like it's better if we have too much time for questions. They always have some, so I've been okay with peeling some stuff back, leaving some stuff out. But it's taken a while to learn.
Yeah, I think it depends on the medium you're doing it in too. I mean, when when you're going in and you're recording videos that go out to somebody and it's a recorded thing, and basically you get the opportunity to watch the video, but you don't necessarily have the opportunity to watch or to question the instructor at the time. That's a totally different boat than when you're actually standing in front of a classroom of people live, right? So, when I go and do live training, and I love that. I mean, I was out for a couple of weeks ago, and I went and taught 3 straight days with 30 people in the room, and we're going through them. We did Power Pivot, we did Power Query, we did some dashboarding courses, and in those ones, I like to make sure that I kind of look at it and go, if I were to write all this stuff and record it in a video, I'd probably have about 4 hours of material maximum. And when I go and teach, it turns into an 8-hour course. Because basically what ends up happening is that, things do slow down. And you've got people that are asking questions. And you want to go out there and help them. And the cool thing is that when you start getting those questions back, it becomes, oh, yeah, you know what? I should have mentioned that. Or hey, I thought maybe that is a great point. Let's talk about that. That wasn't in my material. So it really sort of adds a little bit of flavor and whatnot to it that people get a lot more out of. So, but different pieces for different environments, of course.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because I haven't done a webinar, but it's good when you mention the immediate feedback that you get. And
well, I'll tell you the tough part is if you go in and you teach when you record video. It's one thing. You've got a script. You can set yourself up a script, and you can record it. You put it out the door and say, okay, well, I'm good with it. When you go and you teach live, you can see the whites of people's eyes, so you can know when they get lost. Last week, I did a webinar for a company, and so I'm speaking to them live through a screen sharing program, they're all sitting in the conference room. I can't see any of them. That's tough, because that one you don't know what's going on over there, right? Are they checking their iPhone? Are they playing solitaire? Are they listening? Of course they're not. They're asking good questions, but it's tough because you got to stop and you're going like, I can't tell whether or not that's really resonating with them or not. So that's I think probably for me one of the most difficult environments to teach in is actually the webcast. Still enjoy doing it, and I think that people get a lot out of it, but if I'm learning, I think I'm either going to want to be, with a book or in a classroom with the instructor rather than trying to do the webcast, because it's hard to get that interpersonal play, right? So.
Yeah. Sitting in a webcast, and you put your question in the little chat box, and some unknown person, they kind of half-ass answer it, and so yeah, I'd like a paper book and sitting in a classroom with a 98.6 degree three-dimensional body in front of me.
I'm not picky on the temperature personally. As long as they're alive, it's all good.
The Canadian doesn't care about temperature. It's all good. Hey, Ken, would you mind? I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about your business and your web presence. You said that whenever you originally started up ExcelGuru.ca, that it was really just an effort to give back. You felt guilty from taking so much. It's time to give back something. Can you walk through a little bit? It seems, as I think about some of the people who watch this are people who kind of start their own websites and are bloggers and things like that. Can you talk about kind of the evolution of Excel Guru? And it seems to me like a big jump to create a forum, or there's got to be big kind of evolutionary parts of your site. How did that all kind of develop for you?
Yeah, so I mean, when it first started, originally it was 4 pages, and that was it. I mean, I had a home page. I booted it up in Front Page. I bought my own domain, booted up Front Page, which is a now defunct program. You can do things a lot easier. Anyway, tried to teach myself to write some basic HTML. That was I'm okay with HTML, but that's not the place that I want to be in my life. But basically, I mean, the deal was, okay, how do I get some content out there? So I learned enough of that and whatnot. I mean, you could do that way easier today. So I put up 4 examples, I think, of different things that I had out there. One was, I think, passing VBA over to, or using VBA to pass data back and forth from Access or something like that was one of the longest ones. And then, as time went on, I started to add things, and it was so painful to try and write the HTML to do all this that I went, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find an open source content management system. And I settled at that point, I think, on one called Drupal, and it was just an easy installation, and it gave me something to be able to go in and focus on writing my content rather than coding my content for when it was up there. I started working around with that, and eventually I wasn't really thrilled with it, so I ended up switching that out to a different system. But I worked with that for a bit. I also went and added a WordPress blog, because I thought, it's great to have some articles, but I really want to focus on my articles being tested and knowing that they work. I want to have another place where I can throw some stuff up there that's kind of random. I'm going to, if I want to rant on something, I can put it up there. If I want to try something and see how it works, I'm going to put it up there. So that's where I sort of built the blog and attached that on the side. And at the time, I mean, this was all done on a very cheap, like a Linux hosted thing. I think I was paying $2 a month for my hosting or whatever, and used open source software for all of this. So once I got the blog installed and I decided I wasn't real happy with the main content management system, I went and I flipped that out, got a different one, wrote a bunch more articles, and I think by the time I got up to about, I don't know, it must have been about 60 or 70 articles, I finally decided, you know what, I've contributed to a lot of forums, always wanted my own so that I could put my own flavor and whatever else on it. And that's where it was actually at one of the MVP conferences I was talking to somebody, and they finally said, you know what, if you want to do it, just do it. And so I did. I mean, I added that to it as well. So it's been a bit of, baby steps and whatever else. Probably the part that I do worst at on it is actually selling stuff on my own website, which I should be doing. But, I'm still trying to get that sort of, I seem to spend a lot of time working for other people rather than working for myself. But, that's part of the nature, I think, of the community that we have. So, yeah, I mean, it's sort of grown and evolved over time. It certainly wasn't an overnight, built this huge thing out of nothing. I think Excel Guru has been around now for probably must be 10 or 12 years, I guess, that that the site's been slowly evolving. But I see people out there now today. They start off with a free blog from WordPress and they start blogging. Great. I mean, if this is the kind of thing that you're passionate about and you want to do it, then by all means do it. And you get yourself followed by one or two people as time goes along. I mean, Google will expose something, or somebody else will come along to it, or I even have people that send me a page saying, "Hey, look, would you mind checking this out?" And going like, "Wow, that's really cool." It's a neat thing to be able to do with this, and I mean, we've got this huge megaphone on the internet that makes life real easy for that now, which is awesome. So certainly love it.
Was that a big step for you going to? I mean, what were some of the biggest steps that you had? Was it going to the forum, and if so, how did you adjust to that?
Well, I've been lucky that for the website, I'd say starting the website out was kind of an interesting step because I had to learn how to write some HTML, and that was a little bit of a new learning journey. But I was like learning new programming, and just not really painful, but a little bit tweaking there, whatever else. And then when I added the blog, that was a whole nother learning journey on how to sort of get that part. And keeping in mind, I mean, the whole time I'm doing this, I'm learning about Excel as I'm going along too, right? I mean, that was the other side of it, is I'm learning lots of different languages. The forum was a huge piece because, I mean, that's the first piece of software that I actually paid a licensing fee for, because I've got that on vBulletin. I installed that. It took a ton of time to get that set up, configured, working the way I wanted. I will also be absolutely upfront that if it weren't for the people that were in there posting and volunteering their time to answer those questions, it would be a shadow of what it is today. I don't get there nearly enough, and I'm really, really thankful to all the people that do go in and contribute because, I mean, I think it's important to have the avenue out there, but I really wish I had more time to contribute myself and whatnot. And I mean, I know there's definitely, I'm not going to name anybody because I don't want to leave anybody out, but I mean, there's a good core group of a dozen people in there that do a ton of work on that, and I mean, it's unreal. I mean, you got to throw a huge shout out to the moderators and the guys that are in there posting questions and whatnot. But yeah, it's a neat thing. It certainly was a big step, though. I mean, I'll tell you that as soon as we got to the forum software, it was like that was really the linchpin for me when I realized, learning and programming in web languages is not my forte. I love business intelligence stuff. I love VBA. I love working with Excel formulas. I love Power Query. I love Power Pivot and DAX. But once you hit that web world, you now need to learn HTML, PHP, several scripting languages, some XML. Like, there's so many things that have to go on before you can even really get started. That's a little frustrating, but my problem is I've always been too cheap to pay anybody else to do that for me. So
okay,
Nice.
so let me ask you about that. Okay, so I know I've spent some time frustrated with Excel, some dashboards and stuff that I could build really fast in Excel and want them on the web, but then you got to know JavaScript, you got to know all this other stuff, and I don't know, did you ever feel frustrated that Excel wasn't web friendly, and how have you felt about some of the newer things that they've done to get more web friendly?
I think it's good, and I mean, I think that the way that Microsoft's role is sort of looking going forward is that they're trying to actually shift some of the web authoring content, move back into the desktop. So I mean, what I tell people I'm in courses these days is that, the role of the Excel business intelligence report developer is changing. We are now becoming web programmers in a way. I mean, we're going to write our solutions on the desktop in Excel and then upload it, and it'll just work. I mean, that's the dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some stuff does. I mean, we see some better integration with SkyDrive and whatnot. If you happen to have SharePoint in your organization, there are things there that work. Certainly now there's a big push to Power BI, and I mean, Power BI, one of the big pieces that's been lacking for the past few years, and this is one of the things that I really wanted for our organization for what I have my day job. I got a SQL Server. I can write my stuff in Excel that talks to SQL Server. I want to publish it into a web platform so that somebody can be on the beach in Mexico and reading it on their whatever, iPhone or Windows Phone or whatever, so they can interact with it and see what's going on. But the big challenge with that, I mean, there were several, but one of the big challenges was that my data was stored locally in my SQL Server and it wasn't accessible to the outside. We now see with Power BI coming out that they've actually fixed that problem, and there's a data connector that will actually allow you to build your data connector locally, that pushes the information up to Power BI's site. So now when I build my Excel file, I hook it to that data connection, store it in Power BI, and then at that point in time, when the guy's on the beach on Mexico on his iPhone, he can open it up, he can drive through the slices, do all those things. That's starting to come, so that's pretty cool. You know, would it change the world for me if I never happened? You know what? I got a routine that automates the creation of PDFs, and that's how we consume our dashboards today. So when they give me the ability to get interactive with it and do it on the web and whatever else, providing the price is right, that'll be fantastic. If they don't, I'll keep on sending my reports out in PDF through my automations, and you know, so I got two different worlds there that I'm sort of, you know, playing around with or whatnot. But I think it's a good move that they're coming forward. I don't think that the world is going to revolve completely around the web. You know, I think that's a little bit different than some of the opinions that we see from, you know, from some places. But I still run into a guy. What's that?
Why do you say that?
Okay, so I still run into a guy that last week I was talking to, and he says, you know, look, he says, I got this great thing, I want to build this dashboard or whatnot, and he goes, but I got some pretty big concerns about refreshing this when I'm in my mine in Africa. And I'm like, well, why is that? He says, well, I don't have internet connectivity. He says the country doesn't have internet connectivity virtually at all unless you're in a major or major center. So for me, he says, I've got to be able to still have my standalone solutions. I'm like, you know, I mean, that's true. And I mean, it makes me kind of laugh that the internet connectivity up in Canada is actually generally better than the U.S. in a lot of different places, especially for homeowners and whatnot. We actually have pretty good high-speed internet through most of the country, even in a lot of our remote locations. Not all of them, for sure. But when I see that, you know, dial-up is still a big piece for you guys down there, right?
Yeah,
don't judge us.
Try to get away from that.
If I could jump in on that, actually, you know, that talking about end users in Africa and different parts of the world, you know, kind of lets me know that to some extent you need to prepare for the worst, which kind of feeds into our topic of the week. So I think it's a great segue. Jordan, would you mind kicking us off there?
Sure. So this week's topic is preparing for the worst, lessons learned. And by that I mean, you know, when are times that you've maybe tried to prepare for the worst and it may have succeeded, so you may have done it on a spreadsheet, or maybe it blew up in your face, or maybe you know of stories of where it never really worked out. A few stories really come to mind in my old job. They used to password protect the spreadsheet files all the time, and they would forget the password. So if they password protected the sheet, I was able to hack it and help them. And they said, oh, well, that's not secure. So they actually password protect the file in the end, and then nobody could hack in. That was not, no one was able to fix that. So this week's and what you learned from it and about it. So take it away, anyone. Jump in, anyone?
Well, preparing for the worst, I just think about, you know, starting to freelance and not knowing what was waiting for me, and then realizing that that's what I was supposed to do, was walk into situations not knowing what was going on. The client didn't know what was going on, so I just had to kind of man up, kind of, you know, just go on in there and accept that there was going to be some mystery.
Well, so when I know we were talking earlier about how do you prepare. So I said, well, what do you do about presentations where you want to do this amount of material, but this is the amount of time you have? So what I've learned, at least as far as training goes, is I'll put those on a backup slide, because I can anticipate that those are always, I shouldn't say always, but those are often the questions that are going to be asked after the training. So I'll put those on a backup slide, anticipating someone will almost always raise their hand and say, well, have you thought of this? And I say, yes, I have thought of this, because you are maybe the 20th person to ask me, and after about the 10th person, I realized that I needed to do something about it. So those are things that I like to do, and I like to prepare and tell other people to prepare ahead for.
Yeah, I'd like to hit on a few things. And what I'm going to bring up here probably isn't unique to Excel. It's probably a common in any sort of development, but I think it applies here as well. And I really see kind of in preparing for the worst in development, there's kind of three main things that I look at, and this includes Excel development. Number one is preparing an appropriate structure. And by that I mean, even in our last episode where I talked about, you know, you got your inputs, you got your formulas, you got your outputs, or some sort of a structure that allows you to not get to not get screwed. That is easy for somebody to kind of to pick up and to move forward with, and so to some extent you're able to prepare for the worst because somebody else is able to pick up that spreadsheet. I'll say number two, and Jordan, you brought this up in one of our early tips in this series, which was around versioning. How do you, and you could almost say this is save early, save often, which is a little too easy. So you could almost say that, and we could be done with the show. But to what extent do you bring up your file? You make a version for that day. You make it in a way that's easy to understand, etc. So that's another way. You got to make sure that you're preparing for the worst in doing that. But number three, which is one that I don't think that people think about a lot. And it might be a little bit more germane to the business intelligence environment, to where you're dealing with databases, but I also think that it applies here, which is pushing your formulas down to the lowest common area. As an example, do you write a formula in 15 different areas, or do you write the formula in one area and then just address that calculation in multiple different places, so that whenever you change it once, it cascades through everywhere? And I think, and to some extent, preparing for the worst, and here's where that's a gotcha. Here's where that's a gotcha is if you have a formula and you have a weekly roll-up, a daily roll-up, a monthly roll-up, and you have among a time series, and you change it in one place and you forget to change it in all the other places, you're messed up, because now somebody's going to question your data because the numbers aren't adding up. And instead, having those calculations in kind of a central place that allows it to cascade out, I've found to be kind of a best practice for me in development.
It's funny. It sounds like you basically described a lot of the stuff that I teach in my modeling course. And I mean, one of the things that if we say preparing for the worst, I mean, all the things we're talking about here, I mean, what you're talking about is planning, right? And that's the difference, I think, between what makes a good solution and what makes a solution that works until people start to rely on it and it becomes business critical and then falls over. I know one of the things that we do when we go through and we start planning, especially for big things, is we look at planning what we want our particular models to do. Something else that we do, though, and this is something that I actually picked up from Microsoft when we were down there at some of the summits, is I actually go through and I actually plan out what I don't want the models to do as well. And that's kind of an interesting thing, because it actually allows us, when we get a whole group of people in one room together and say, okay, here's what this thing is supposed to do, here's what it's never going to do. And one of the big examples we had for that is we built an economic analysis, which is supposed to forecast. Basically what it does is says, well, if your land is worth this much today, what would the lift be if I kept it, or should I just sell it today and do I make whatever off this thing? And we said, all right, so if we're going to build this model, will it ever be used to project cash flow? Is it going to need to tie back to the accounting system? Nope, it's a totally different purpose. That's great. In that case, we won't build certain aspects into it that would be needed. And if it were changed into a different format, then we would have had to have built those in. So it helps you, when you work with those kind of things, when somebody comes back and says, okay, well, now I need this. Like, well, we talked about this. We had a great big meeting about this, and we said, no, this isn't going to be addressed, and we never plumbed in the stuff to make that happen. It sort of helps with scope creep a little bit, depending on how much power the approving authority above you actually has, and that can eventually end up running its course as well. But it is an interesting thing to start looking at when we deal with our stuff like that. So
I think your point is well taken, particularly as something starts to become less something that you're maintaining on your desktop and it becomes more mission critical. And since you brought up cash flows, I could think of just a simple example might be net present value, where you have your weighted average cost of capital. And your weighted average cost of capital, you could either write that into the equation, you could hard code that in, or you can have a weighted average cost of capital cell to where you're referencing that in multiple places, so you just change it once and it kind of cascades throughout. And at that point, you're dealing with something that's much more mission critical, that you need to be in contact with the controller and people like that on how that's changing.
Well, and that's one thing I know for our models. I mean, typically what we try and do is we try and build them dynamic enough that there are input cells that drive all of those key assumptions, and everything is built off individual input cells that are extremely well labeled and whatever else, so that, I mean, basically it's because it's modeling. I mean, the whole idea is to change inputs and see what ends up happening on the other end, right? But that does give us that ability that when we want to go and flip something, like let's say that we decide that the inflation rate that we want to use is going to be 1% instead of 2%, I'm not going back to modify 26,500 formulas. I'm modifying one, and it cascades through the entire model, which is key. So, big piece.
Well, yeah, and so you do get me thinking about this. Around development and yeah, preparing for the worst. And usually, I'm dealing with one person, a few people, a small office, and I've got to ask a lot of questions about what a tool is meant to do, who's going to be modifying it, um, because that determines what needs to happen to it, right? What the level of validation and automation that have to go in it, looking at their budget, and then I get the complaint about, does it have to be so complicated? Does it have to be so expensive? Okay, well, we've got somebody who is not familiar with Excel. They've got something that is critical. They're managing expenses or something. And I am not going to cut corners and send them something with no validation, and then they've put a date where like a hotel room should go, that the name of the hotel or whatever, or the amount or something. No, I'm putting all that validation in. And then if they want all these reports and everything, we have to have a conversation, okay? We're going to have to build in some training here, or it's going to be a whole lot for me to automate all those charts that you want. So do you really need all of that? And then, finding that area where they have some choice and they don't have some choice. Me not putting validation in, they don't have a choice. All the graphs and extra stuff, then yeah, that's where they have a choice. But yeah, that is preparing for the worst, because I do not want to have somebody send something to somebody that then gets mad because it's wrong, and then they come back to ours.
Yeah, that's one piece that I wish we'd see some more investment from the Excel side, is on data validation. Man, there's 100 things we could do in that area that I would love to see, especially when you start pushing things out to the web and whatever else. But I agree. I mean, data validation is a massive part of my models, especially if they're going to be handed off to someone else. It's all good if I'm using it, but I mean, if somebody else is going to be doing it, again, the level of Excel skill drives it. I mean, how often are they going to update it? Because let's face it, the longer it goes between updates, the more they're going to forget, the more important it is to have those rules on there to prevent them from putting the wrong things in. After all, I mean, there's the whole thing, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Let's make sure the garbage never gets in to begin with.
Yep, and the issue, yeah, when you talk about the frequency of the updates and everything, look at how fast is this thing going to grow. Okay, so yeah, we can build a 5-row thing that works, but then if this thing is going to grow really fast, that's a whole different project than something that's going to stay small for a long time.
Yep.
Now, I'm also wondering, not just from things that have worked, but do you know of any thoughts or have any stories of times where you tried to do something that you thought was preventative, but it actually backfired? I mean, one thing that I do is, just as Rick was saying, save often. So I have Control S, I'm always doing it, and sometimes I'll run a macro thinking, don't save afterwards because this wasn't the right output, and then I'll just put the keystroke in, Control S, and it'll save over exactly what I was telling myself not to do, but I've trained myself to do it, and 80% of the time, 90% of the time, I need to be saving because in case it crashes. So anything like that, anything you've seen from clients where they said, oh, I thought I was preventing the worst, and suddenly they have a giant spreadsheet because they didn't want to delete anything. They just kept making a new tab for every new report. So things like that. What has your experience been?
Track changes.
Track changes.
They turned on track changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can maintain history this way. No.
Right. Things like that, or someone will say, or someone will just save every spreadsheet, and then they say, well, I want to make a report. So the report will be those terrible Excel formula links, to all the different files, which are just, I don't know what linking to different files with a formula does in Excel, but it just seems to ruin it over time. So
we had one.
I wonder.
I was told
we had one consultant that built us this massive model for budgeting or whatever else. This is before I started doing a lot of our Excel stuff, and the guy, he encapsulated every different department in its own separate file, which was great, but then he used another folder or file and linked them all together. And as it turned out, somewhere in that whole thing, he ended up with a circular link between files.
Sweet.
Oh my God. What a nightmare. that wasn't much fun. But I mean, he started with the best of intentions, right? Separate all that data, encapsulate it. Let's do one department at a time, then we'll roll this one up. But yeah, it nasty stuff. But try to avoid those linked files. Nasty.
Yeah. But I can't think of something where I've tried my best and then things still backfired. I don't know. I've had just situations where, I'm working in the newest version of Excel and do something and then send it off to somebody, and one of their collaborators is behind the times and something blows up on them. Doesn't work right because they don't have the formula or whatever I did in their version. What else? I thought about something else, but I don't know. It's hard to think about that stuff because I kind of just own it. Just say, okay, I got this call. Somebody's mad because they're in 2003, and I used an if NA, and if NA doesn't exist for 2003. So things are weird. Now I got to go in and fix it. But when I think about preparing for the worst, going in and teaching, not knowing if I'm going to have a fun class, a dead class, an inquisitive class, just don't know. But see, I like that. I like, you just walk to the chute and get on that bull, and the latch man and the gate man open it up, and you ride, and hope you stay on for 8 seconds.
I have to laugh, actually. I'm preparing for the worst with that. I have, when I teach, I've got my laptop, which is hooked up to a projector, and then I've got my Surface, which I have on the side and has all my notes on it. So what probably a lot of the people in the class don't realize is that I have every single step of my examples is documented on the Surface. Every single step.
Mm.
And there's nothing better than when you figure out partway through the example that one of those steps was actually wrong. Oh, that's not so good. So I've had that happen. But I mean, you know what? You laugh it off, you keep going, right? And undo it. So I mean, there's your example of preparing for the worst. But
I stopped doing that. I used to do that. I used to write down every single step on that I was going to do for a presentation, and then because I realized I was skipping things or I was sort of kind of improvising on the spot, that was my lesson. I was like, you know what? I just got to practice it beforehand, get a good handle on what I'm going to do, and then just go out and do it. No step by steps, because I'll just ruin my train of thought. So.
I'm a little bit more like on this, and that I don't necessarily have every single step written down, although many times I do. But how I think it's a little bit common is that I'm a bit obsessive about making sure that I'm not embarrassed or not being embarrassed. And just there's something about just being on stage and everybody looking at you. You're saying, "Oh no, projector's not working," and everybody's looking at me, and I gotta get this, and I'm just like, So I mean, I'm one of those guys who show up 2 hours early. Make sure the monitor works, make sure this works, make sure that works. People are like, "What the hell are you doing here?" The janitors turning on the lights for me. I'm like, "Hey man, it's 5 in the morning, but I gotta prep. I know this ain't thing until 8 o'clock." And it's just this petrification, I guess, just being petrified of being embarrassed, of being on stage to where you have 30 people, 60 people, 90 people, or if you have a room of 100 people or so, and suddenly you're tap dancing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that's just for me. Preparing for the worst on that, man, is just it keeps me up at night.
That's hard, man. But okay, so there's a lot to that, and stand up has helped with that. You go out to these places and bomb, But the thing is, you just get back up on it. And I've talked with professional trainers because I would have problems. The person with the keys is an hour late, and all of these people and me are standing out on the sidewalk. And then they go, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, but I'm here now." Okay, yeah. And then we get up there, and then the adapter between the projector and my computer is not the right one. So now these people are inside, but now they're still sitting and looking, waiting for something to start. And yes, it's embarrassing. I am not going to pretend that it's not embarrassing. But the thing is, when I hear professional trainers say that it happens to them, you go and a projector bulb will go out or whatever. And a guy told me a story of he was hosting something, and the guest speaker, this big doctor, Where's the doctor? Where's he at? He calls the guy up on the phone, and when he picks up the phone, he can hear the TV going. And the guy says, "Oh, I thought it was tomorrow. I'm sitting here watching TV." So the thing is, that stuff happens, and you do your best. And I'm just learning, as long as you're not being shifty and not being cocky and not preparing because, oh, I wing it all the time. Oh, hell no, that don't fly. But you do what you can, and stuff still happens.
See, but do you guys find, like, I mean, I ran into this a while ago, and I mean, I don't use every step in my presentation, but got them all there in case. But when you go through and you teach the same course, I've actually had this happen now where I've taught the same course, and I've done it, like, man, in the last 2 months, I've done the same course 5 times. So, I mean, I know the material off the top of my head, right? But does that make you complacent? Do you now walk in there and I'm going, like, I got all my stuff or whatever else, and suddenly I look down at my surface, and I'm like, man, I'm like 5 pages past this thing. Now I'm trying to catch up because, you know, you are confident, you're running around with it and whatnot. Now you're just like, oh man, I just got ahead of myself. Let me just catch up and you know, settle or whatever else. Because I mean, that does happen to me on occasion. I don't think most people notice or care all that much, but does that happen to you guys or?
I would say not. I actually like it. I mean, the first few times.
Can you summarize it again for me? Because I didn't catch like the essence of it.
So I mean, like you say, I'm teaching the same thing 5 days out of the last like 30, right? Yeah. So I walk in there now and I present, and I'm so comfortable with my material. Next thing I know, I look down at my notes. I'm like, my notes are 5 pages behind where I am because I kept on forgetting to flip them because I'm like already running down the path, and now I've got to rein myself back in to get back on target, right?
Got you.
So
right.
Jordan doesn't do that because Jordan just like flies by the seat of his pants through the whole thing. So
well, the first few I do that. Like I have to do it. The first one I'm really anxious, so I have to outline everything. So what I was saying, like what Rick was saying, checking out the spot early. So I try to do that. My old job, I used to do stuff with the government. So some of these rooms I couldn't get into early, and then I'd get in and they wouldn't have the right cords, and then they're like, you can't plug your laptop in. And you have to burn it to a CD, and we have to make sure the CD's approved. This actually, I did one at the Pentagon. This happened. They're like, oh, it's going to be in this room, and then it wasn't. It was in a different room. And that one was just like, everyone was just staring at me, and I felt my face like on fire. But it all actually worked out for the best. And what I learned is to bring extra projector cords. But to answer your question, so that's everyone, if you're thinking about that out there, bring an HDMI cord and a VGA cord and even a DVI cord because they might not have one, and it might mess up. Yeah, or that thing. So I didn't have that thing.
It's got HDMI, it's got VGA, it's got DVI on it as well, and plugs into the laptop. That's what I carry with me, so I can connect to anything.
Then.
Yep.
So.
That thing's better. But yeah, bring backup. Don't rely on them. But to answer your question, I like it when I'm at that point because then I can improvise. Because then I can just really just like, you know, once I'm at that point, I'm like, forget these notes. I'm done with them. Throw them out, you know, like I'm ready to like go and do this thing because I like it and I'm ready to use the energy of the class and I can switch it up. I'm not held to that. So I think when I've gotten to that point, then that is when I truly feel comfortable about teaching this course. So
that's when it's game on.
That's right.
But to Ken's point, there comes that point even whenever it's game on time where you're like, oh no, I just messed up. Now I don't have my notes.
So, my concern is when I've got people that are following along with me, right? You're trying to teach them and they're doing the examples hands-on, and suddenly it's like, oh, wait a minute, I think I just skipped over 3 things, and now their example won't work anymore. So that's the part where you got to be a little bit careful. But I mean, I always build whenever I'm doing my courses. I actually have my Power Pivot course has 9 separate workbooks that are all saved at various stages. So we can always go back and say, you know what? If you didn't catch where I am right now or you're having trouble, let's just open this one and catch up now. And then you can sort of skip past those kind of things as well. So it gives me a chance to get back into my notes too.
Sounds good. Jordan, did you have one more thing before we moved on to the next topic?
Yeah. Shoot, we could talk about this, and you know.
No, I'm ready.
What am I? I'm thinking about the students in a class, and one of the most difficult times. Now you got the 2 that look bored and don't want to be there, right? And I confirmed that there was one guy. He was dragged by his girlfriend. He did not want to be there.
How could you not want to go to an Excel class?
Especially with me and his bow tie. Shoot. Gonna learn something. But having somebody in the class that wants to be the teacher's helper. You know, somebody will ask a question. I say, well, that solution sounds like you really need a VBA for that because it is that. And just raise your hand. For people who don't know what VBA is, and then he's over here in the dark corner explaining VBA. Wait a minute. So now learning how to control the room and bring it back to the front and not from the helper guy, self-appointed helper guy in the dark corner.
You know, I think that Carl Pepperseed wouldn't have that.
No.
he would take that. He knows how to handle that.
Yeah, but learning how to control that room.
So, Oz, would you mind, so speaking of control, would you mind controlling us on the tips section this week and let us know what you got going on there?
All right. Here comes hot tips. Open wide and let that steam come out.
Yuck.
Yuck. Yuck. And she. All right. I have a hot tip, and this actually follows from the 5 that we were giving out over the past couple episodes. Jim Tays from Indiana sent in a tip, and I have arranged for him to get his bottle of sriracha because it is a spicy tip. All right, so let me do the screen share and show you what we have. Okay. So here's a challenge where, say, in the state of Ohio, some furniture rental is needed. So it's needed to start on the 28th of July, ending on the 10th of August, a recliner, and they need 135. And here is the complete inventory here. And James Tays has this set up wonderfully where everything in Ohio is highlighted because Ohio is in the in A2. So if we change to Indiana, now everything in Indiana is highlighted, and we can tell that they want 135. 32 more are needed, so we can't rent there. So what happens if we say that, okay, 80 is good enough? Okay, so they are available. All right, so the formula is a sum product, right? Because he said he tried sum ifs and it didn't work so well. So he pulled out the sum product, and I won't go through all of the details here, but what's happening is it's saying go through column J, the state column, and wherever it's equal to A2, Indiana, and then multiply that by the amount, right, N. And we do that again with the item, recliner, and then here is the really tricky part, is looking at the time period. Right, so now we can see what is available during that full time period. So let's see, let's change something here. So we're looking at recliners. Recliners in Indiana. So I'm going to change something here. Got Michigan recliners. Now, what if these people, they needed these recliners until 12 September. Okay. And okay. So this isn't a good example. But you know, okay. When we go to 390, they aren't enough. You need 90 more. But this sum product is really the point. This is what was able to find out what's available and what's not based on the state the time that is needed and the item. So that is the hot tip, and thank you, James Tays. Come back here. All right. Let's see. So let's do 4 bottles of sriracha for that. For thinking about the layout there, right? Because that's the big thing, the layout and thinking through and using that sum product.
So if I remember correctly, there's a prize for Mr. Tays. Is that right?
Yes, yes, I've arranged for his bottle of ghost pepper sriracha to be sent to him from California Blazing Chili Farms.
Now,
way to go, James.
do you have any recommendations for the people you send this blazing sriracha to? I mean, should they just put it in a cup and drink it? Is that the way to enjoy it?
I think this is an appropriate question, Oz, because I saw a video of yours on YouTube. You know, as I was editing some of the videos from the last episode, I was looking at some videos of yours on YouTube where you were going through, gosh, White Castle.
Oh yeah.
Go through the White Castle drive-through, and they have a sriracha chicken sandwich.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this ain't nothing. I'm like, oh, that seems like that's pretty hot to me. So I mean.
How does one enjoy
and then you took that sandwich and you brought your old sriracha with you in the car. Well,
Yeah.
like that, you're like, just poured some more on there. So,
Yes.
how should James Tays? How should he take the sriracha in?
James Tays, Sylvia, Uhas, Heather Gray, winners of other bottles of sriracha. Just find that place where it's just below pain, right? And then you just enjoy it. You just enjoy it. You get that endorphin rush from the spice. Just enjoy it. The gods gave it to us for us to enjoy it, not for novelty. So you put it in a cup, no. That's novelty. That's being silly. That's disrespecting the gods for what they gave us.
Ooh, sorry.
Yeah.
My bad.
Sorry for even suggesting that.
Like disrespecting gods now. Okay, next tip.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna do the next tip. I had a few more sriracha jokes in there, but I think I got the message. Stop making the sriracha jokes. The gods will burn you. Okay, so everyone see my screen. So, you know, there's a lot of questions about how you protect a spreadsheet. You know, the typical ways you would go and put that protect sheet on, and that's often a good way. There's some issues with it using other components in Excel, and you know, there's a lot of playing around to get it just right, because you'll make changes and it'll say the spreadsheet is locked. So there's a poor man's way to do this, and I'm going to show you the poor man's way to do this that works in a pinch. So let's say you have a contiguous area, and by contiguous I mean, you know, users may only select in here, they're not going to go out here or out here. What you can do is you can actually change the scroll area property of your spreadsheet. So I'm going to go to Developer tab, make sure you have that enabled, click Properties, and then the Properties box popped up over on my other screen, so I'm going to drag it over just so everyone sees. Okay, so I have this property already selected. It says scroll area, and I can, I guess I have to type it in manually. So what I can do is I can say, let's say A1 through K20. That sounds good. So I hit enter, and you can see it put these, the absolute reference pieces right next to it. Okay, so you can see that I'm clicking around within that area, but I can't escape that area. So that has become the only region that I'm able to select, and you can see this actually works very similar to the way you can unlock a cell and protect the sheet. So this is a very poor man's way to do it very quickly, and one other cool thing about that is that this in fact does lock the scroll area. So I'm actually scrolling with my wheel mouse right now. It won't scroll down. You see that I'm doing it in the corner. It won't do that. All right, so something you should know about this scroll area. Problem is that you can save a spreadsheet and it's not going to stick. I don't know why it doesn't stick, but you type it in, it's going to stay for as long as you have that spreadsheet open. You're going to save it and it's going to disappear. So how do you get around that? Well, we have to turn to our good old friend VBA, and I'm going to just show you very quickly what I did. So you're going to go to this workbook, which is, you know, your workbook object, And then there's the workbook open event, which is called when your workbook is open, you have macros enabled. And here I've used sheet 1, so I've used that sheet object. And I always like to retype things for you. So sheet 1 dot scroll area, and then you can just put it in here. So let's say K20. So something like that. I'm going to hit F5 real quick. It's as if I just opened the workbook, and it has the same effect. So make sure that once you've decided, so you'll click Properties, and once you've decided the scroll area that you like, copy and paste that into that I shouldn't say formula, that code I just gave you, and that's how to do it. So I really like this because it allows me to keep a region open to be clicked on, keep another part of the spreadsheet locked, and it's very easy, and I don't have to deal with the protect and unprotect. Now, does it work in every situation? No. So this is something where you're going to have to balance your needs against your level of protection. So, but I really do like it as a very simple solution, and that is my tip.
Well, I'm wondering about what are some of those scenarios where it doesn't work, and particularly, can you partially protect the table with that?
There's something about, someone who's smarter than me could probably answer that. There's a problem, or I should say, there's a time when it is actually useful for tables, because I guess tables have an issue with workbook protection. Someone, Ken, can you jump in? Do you know about that? Someone probably knows more about that than I do, that sometimes they don't seem to work as well.
I generally don't protect the sheet that has a table on it. That's where I expect my users to do their input.
Right, right. There is something about that. I'm sure there are people watching banging their heads saying, come on, Jordan, you should know this. But I don't. But I'll tell you when this doesn't work. It doesn't work when you have, so I'm going to jump back to our screen. This can only protect a contiguous range. I hope that word is right when I say contiguous. Mm-hmm. By that I mean the range has to all be connected. So I can't do this and then do this. It's not going to let me do that. It has to be one whole range. So if you're doing that locked, if you're going to do the locked, if you're going to unlock them, I'll just right-click and you do the protection, you flip off the locked, and then you protect the worksheet. That will work here. So that is when you will need it. But for very very simple items, this works. And also this works is if you want to keep your users in one area of the screen.
Right.
Also, the scroll area can do that. So that's why I like it. There are other ways to do that as well, but the scroll area is very simple.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Ken, yeah, I come across this issue a whole lot where there might be, say, 5 columns in a table, and we need it to be in a table so that it can expand, but then there is one column that's got some super complicated array formula in it that they need to leave alone because it's calculating something that they need, and yeah, it is constantly balancing, okay, maybe I need to put it somewhere else, but it would be great to be able to partially protect the table.
And I think
actually, I ran into a product recently a little while ago that that does something similar. We ended up actually buying a copy to go into a project that I built for something else called one-click user form. And the guy's actually done a really good job of it. And basically what happens is you can actually have a button on your worksheet. So you set up your table with all your formulas in there, and you click the button on your worksheet, and it pops open a user form that actually is the input mechanism for your table. And it actually will lock all of your formula ones so that you can't go in and modify them. That's one of the features it has. Also, this data validation, a bunch of other stuff. It's actually quite good. So it might be something you want to check out if you're doing work for users. And that one-click user form is what it's called.
One-click user form. Okay.
Yeah, and he charges for it. But as I say, I mean, if you're trying to develop an interface like that, it's costly. So it's worth looking into.
Okay. Cool. Cool. All right. So let's give this, say, 3 bottles of sriracha, because it's great to know about it. It's great to know about it. I loved knowing about it, and then yeah, it was disappointing to find out that after I came back, opened the file, that the scroll area had not been saved. So yeah, it's great to know about it.
You can get around that. You can get around that.
Yeah. You're working on another sriracha, aren't you? 3 ain't good enough.
It's because I insulted. I insulted the sriracha gods.
No, you didn't. No insult was taken.
No, you did. It's the legitimate 3 sriracha tip.
All right. So Ken had want to show us some Power Query.
Show you some Power Query. Let me see here if I can. I'm not. Don't do tons of this, so I'm just going to see if I can actually figure out how to get my my screen share working here. So let me see here. Can you guys see my Excel all right?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So this is one of the things that I run into when I'm out there working with things is that I get sent a workbook and it's got a table of data in it like this because this is how users generally think. They create this listing that says, hey, I've got this my sales categories down the right, my dates across the top, and I've got a whole bunch of values in this. And then, of course, they want to have it looking at it a little bit differently. They say, geez, I'd really like to have my beer, wine, liquor across the top and my dates down the side, and maybe I want to do some other things with it. And you start thinking, man, it would be awesome if this was actually in a source that I could use to drive a pivot table, but unfortunately, this is kind of a pivot table output. So wouldn't it be awesome if we had a tool where we could just go and say, you know what, I'm going to take this area right here. I'll take the whole thing, actually. And we go to, say, Power Query, and if I could say, I want to take the data from a table, and it popped in the thing that recognized my table had headers, and if I could say, okay, no problem, and if it pulled it into Power Query, and then we'll just wait for that to happen. So it reads my range and puts it into a nice little table for me. Come on. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just go and say maybe remove this last column, and I could filter out this row that says total. We don't need that anymore. And then in order to unpivot it, instead of going through all kinds of wild and wonderful work with Excel, wouldn't it be awesome if I could just grab one column and then go over to a command like transform and click unpivot and unpivot other columns and build an unpivoted data source right out of that table? Wouldn't that be cool?
Damn, yes.
So I'm going to just go clean this guy up right now. I'm going to rename this, and we'll call this one date, and I'm going to go, right now it's being looked at as text here, so we're going to go and change this from text into a proper date, and maybe we'll go and rename this guy here to quantity. I'm going to try and spell that right just because I think it's better when you do. And we'll call our table sales. And then I can hit apply and close, and it'll go in and drop it into a new worksheet for me in a second. So we know we've got a gray table. It's going to turn green. That means Power Query is done with it. And then, of course, I could always go back if I've got a table of data. I mean, what do I do with the table of data? You got to pivot it. I mean, that's what they're for. So we'll go click Pivot Table, add it to an existing worksheet. I'm just going to drop it over here for right now. So I can obviously go and rebuild my table with my quantities in it exactly as it was on the first worksheet.
Yep.
But of course, what's the point? I mean, I've got my row totals, I've got my column totals, but now I want to see it different. Well, I can go back and I can insert a new pivot table to look at my data in a slightly different way. So now we can go and say, let's throw our sales category across the top and our dates down the left here, and throw my quantities in the middle. Perfect. Of course, I could change that out to averages or whatever else. Well, that's awesome. I mean, I've been dying for this feature for years. But then you get the question as, well, what happens? Well, you know what happens is users come along and they say, okay, I'm going to send you a new report here, and I'm going to give you the sales now for January 8th, 2015, and it's going to have some numbers in here. Oh, and then, of course, you know what users do. They always try and screw you up. So they go and they add new categories of stuff, too. Let's say cider, and we'll throw a quantity in this one as well, 123 of those. And this has got a formula in it, so we better run that across. And this guy here should have a total in it as well. We'll make sure that's all there. Now, we've already gone through, we've done the work with Power Query. I notice I got this in a different year, so I'm going to set that back to 2014. Not that it really matters. Wouldn't it be cool if all I needed to do to refresh this was to just right-click on it and say refresh, and it pulled that information in, and then I could go back to my pivot tables and also see that they can be refreshed as well, and it's got all the information in there. Yes. I love this feature. Power Query does a ton of different stuff, but this is just one that you know, you can work with this stuff when people send it to you in an output format. That's always been the problem with pivot tables, is that pivot tables need to consume their data in this format, and that's not the way users think. The whole idea behind a pivot table was taking a table of data and turning it into the way that users do want to see it. But it's never worked well going the other way. Yeah.
Yeah. Woo. Yeah, this is great. This is great. You know, oh man. Because yeah, just You know, I had a client that had projects across the top and people down the side. And to unpivot that thing immediately versus try to write some formulas and drag stuff around, or, you know,
Oh,
dealing
it's
with relative and absolute cell references. Oh, man. Yeah.
somebody needs to get him a bucket of water, guys.
Staying
Man,
hot.
that's 5 sriracha bottles all the live long day. With all of that Power Query, Power View, Power Pivot, all of that stuff.
Well, I'll say to the audience, I mean, for anybody that hasn't used Power Query yet, I mean, it's a free download. You just go out, do your Google or your Bing search for download Power Query. It works with Excel 2010 or Excel 2013 Pro Plus. And that's just like that's just one piece of it. It is such an incredibly powerful program for cleaning up data, taking, I don't know, I mean, ASCII files that have all kinds of garbage in them and putting it into a proper table, or talking to Excel files, or importing individual CSVs or text files or entire directories worth, stuff off the websites, whatever. I mean, there's so many things you can do with it. It's just an amazing tool.
So now let me ask you one thing is I haven't figured out how after you save a file that you've done something like that and then you open it back up, it starts asking you about some connection.
I haven't run into too many of those. I do on occasion. When you go and go to refresh your data, it may ask you whether or not you're working with public or organizational or private data. If you get into one of those, you have the option of either trusting the data source, which you can do in that interface, or if you, I just recently did a job for a client where we actually create the data files using VBA. We create the data files on the fly, and then using Power Query, we actually hash out on the fly what the file or what the path is to those individual data files. So with that particular one, and I actually just posted a rant about this on my blog yesterday, because there is a problem in the interface there that we don't have a lot of control on it. But there is a button called Fast Combine, and if you click the Fast Combine button, it's a workbook level setting, and that makes those error messages disappear, and it just says, all right, fine, I'll just do it for you anyway, leave it alone. So that's the sort of the workaround of that.
Okay.
Thing. I can probably show you that actually. Where are we here? So if I go back to this guy here and this one, can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
No. Okay. Let me try that one more time here. Screen share on that one. You got to click the Start button. That's important. So when you're going through and you're working with Power Query here, there's this great big, well, it's not great big because I got a shrunk down monitor, but this Fast Combine button here, if I were to click that and make sure it's selected, then at this point I can go back and I can enable it, and then I can refresh my my queries, and it won't prompt me for any of the security or information settings. Okay. So that's how you get past that one.
Okay, cool, good. All right. Well, thanks a lot. So,
no worries.
Those are the hot tips for the week.
So next up, the way you can find and the way you can get news onto this program is to email us at news@exceltvshow.com. Again, that's news@exceltvshow.com. And I went there this week, and there's one thing in particular I'd like to share, and there's a website out there called Trump Excel. TrumpExcel.com. It's run by Sumit Basal, and it's about a year old or so. And we first profiled this website, gosh, I want to say episode 3 or 4 or so. And I'd like to show you something on this website. Give me one moment here. And hopefully you can see the Trump Excel website.
We can see it.
Okay, great. So here's the cool thing. So if you go here, and it looks like since I got this picture-in-picture, it won't let me scroll down, unfortunately. But if you go to this website, Trump Excel, this guy here, Sumit Basal, he just became, in the last 2 weeks, an Excel MVP.
All right.
So, I mean, this is like, yeah, so they're like handing out MVPs right now out there in India. And this guy... Exactly. This guy's had his website up for a year now, and is an Excel MVP. So massive congratulations to Trump Excel and Sumit Basal.
Yeah.
With that, I believe also, Jordan, you had something to share as well.
I do have something to share indeed. All right, let me do this screen share. I'm gonna flip on my second monitor, which I like to flip off just to manage the light levels. You can see it changes. Okay, one sec. Now, let's do this screen share because I like to show you. All right, so VBA Express, friends of the show, Zach Barisi, is doing a free webinar on August 8th. So if you want to sign up to the webinar, go to vbaexpress.com. You can click on this giant banner, hard to miss. Click on that, and then the registration link is in here. So we highly recommend you check it out because VBA Express is a friend of the show, and Zach Barisi, as you saw, he was on recently, does a very good job with tables. So learn about tables, learn for free. What could be better than that?
I think Oz, you also have some news on Zach Barisi as well. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. Yes, his website launched a few days ago, ExcelTables.com. Brand new site, starting to get content loaded onto it. So check it out because tables, man, they will save your spreadsheet integrity, allow your formulas and pivot tables to be dynamic. Your drop-down list can be dynamic. Gotta know tables. And I just posted a class that I'll be teaching in Chicago. My last workshop in Chicago before I moved to Portland, August 13th. 3 Excel features that more Excel users need to know, and I will be covering Power Query and showing how to unpivot. We're going to be doing tables, and we're going to do advanced filter. All right, those 3 things that are like the dirty little secret of Excel, but we're going to pull them out. August 13th in Chicago. All right, and that's what I have.
And Ken, what you got going up there in British Columbia?
You know, I don't know. I got my normal website stuff going on, but I've got some courses coming up in, I believe, October, November, December that I'm going to be doing. The best way to find out about those is to go to my website, just sign up for my newsletter. I try to email people out and give them a heads up as to when they're coming and whatnot, as well as any other things that I'm doing. So it's a pretty infrequent newsletter. I like to say it's monthly-ish, but it's less than that. I make sure I don't spam people. So if you want to know what I am doing, that's the place to find out. So.
And say the URL?
The URL is www.excelguru.ca. So that's EXCELGURU.ca.
Excellent, excellent.
Great. Thank you. And lastly, where can you find us? One moment. So where can you find us? Well, guess what? We're all over the place. But in addition to that, by the time we made a kind of a deal with ourselves that once we hit 1,000 YouTube subscribers, that we were gonna celebrate properly in a setting that would be in a sort of setting that we would invite Carl Pepperseed to. We would roll this out. We would all have the porn mustaches and everything. It'd be set. And so yeah, I said it. So
we'll cut that out.
Everybody gets a 1972 Camaro. All right. So here's the deal. So we're gonna hit 1,000. We're at 923 right now. By the time our next episode comes out in 2 weeks, we'll be at 1,000 subscribers at about 5 months or so old. So first off, thank you, and thank you for all of our guests like Kim Puls and others who have been here who have we've borrowed on their name to allow this to happen. So thank you very much for that. But we're going to celebrate in fashion, and that we'll be making some announcements next week. So stay tuned to our Google+, to our Facebook, and our Twitter there. We also have a Facebook group. We're also on LinkedIn as well, so feel free to follow us there. We'll be making some announcements over the next 2 weeks about our URL, about our website, and about how that's all coming along. So that's what's happening with us. You could also ask to be included in our HOA circle. our Hangout on Air Circle. So on Google Plus, you can just say, hey, add me to your Hangout on Air Circle. And what that means is whenever these come out, whenever we have these every 2 weeks or so, we're trying to plan to where we have 5 of these a quarter or 20 or so a year. That you are added to the invitation for that. So just hit us up on Google Plus, ask us to include you in the HOA circle, the Hangout on Air circle, and we'll make sure that you're included on that. And lastly, to close, Ken, now that we've actually spoken here, that we've actually talked, you've heard my voice and I've heard your voice. I don't consider this stalking at this point.
I was going to say, now I know who to watch out for on the street.
Exactly. That was not, you just know like my profile picture or anything else. Now you know the sound of my voice as it's approaching you. But I'd just like to thank you for all that you do over there at ExcelGuru.ca. You've been an inspiration for quite some time, and even if I go to other websites like VBAexpress.com and other places like that, people speak very highly of you. You're definitely considered one of the inner circle, and you're considered one of the guys who are kind of, I don't know, at the nexus of everything. So thank you for being on the show, and I have a lot of deep appreciation for you. So thank you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I've enjoyed it.
Great.
Thank you for being here.
So everyone, this is Rick Grantham. Thanks again to Ken Puls, and for Jordan Goldmeier and Oz du Soleil. This is Rick Grantham saying we'll see you in 2 weeks with some big announcements. 9:05 p.m. Eastern Time in 2 weeks. We'll see you there.